I hit play, and my best friend whispered my boyfriend's name twice. The lie snapped like glass. Mara Quill, 28, sat on the kitchen floor while rain stitched the windows, the message thread glowing a surgical blue on her phone. Tessa Vale said it was a misunderstanding, a typo, an auto-corrected ghost. But the timestamps lined up with the night. Mara waited alone, candles burning down to stumps, while Jonah Reed, 30, sent, running late, and nothing else. The texts were plain, sharpened by context. An address Mara didn't know, a photo cropped too tight, a promise to keep it just ours. Now, the refrigerator hummed like a witness, and the apartment smelled of wet wool and cinnamon. Mara replayed the voice note, until the whisper blurred into a shape that couldn't be excused. Friends don't write like lovers. Lovers barely dare write this honest. Her thumb hovered above call, above block, above the small nuclear options we dress as choices. She imagined the story told back to her as if it were someone else, simpler, crueler, solvable. But the phone didn't care who deserved what. It only offered light, and in that light, everything ugly was finally clear. The cab moves like a slow confession through streets that smell of diesel and rain, and every red light feels personally appointed to make her replay the voice note. Mara inventories the years with Tessa. Borrowed dresses, shared rejections, the night shifts that turned them into co-conspirators against the city's indifference. Those memories compete with the bluntness of the text. Keep it just ours. Like a hymn sung over a siren. She tries on different futures the way people try coats. Confront Jonah and rupture. Confront Tessa and unravel. Confront neither and calcify. The windshield wipers carve brief windows where neon swims. Each clearing lets her glimpse a version of herself who already knows what she will do. She pictures Jonah's soft apologies lining up like dominoes, and wonders if they always required Tessa to fall first. The driver says nothing. The radio whispers cricket scores. Somewhere 2 floors above the road, a generator coughs back to life. When her phone buzzes, she refuses to look. She wants the choice to be hers, not dragged from her by an algorithm that learned her insecurities faster than she did. The building's corridor is a narrow lung of damp concrete and leftover heat. Mara steps past doormats that read welcome like weak spells, counting breaths to stop her hands from broadcasting their tremor. Jonah's door is at the end, a soft rectangle of light underneath, suggesting someone home, suggesting omission rather than absence. She remembers the first time he cooked for her, over-salted pasta, underdone promises, and wonders if intimacy is mostly learning to season disappointment. On the wall, a framed photo of the building's original owners presides with sepia certainty, strangers who look capable of leaving and meaning it. Her phone buzzes again. She flips its screen down because courage sometimes wears the costume of avoidance. She rehearses 3 versions of hello: the polite, the surgical, the one that sounds like sirens. A stray cat watches from the stairwell landing, unimpressed. The hall smells of cumin and paint thinner. Somewhere a television laughs at a joke without context. Mara lifts her hand to knock and holds it there, like a conductor delaying the downbeat that will start the ruin. Her phone vibrates insistently, a small heartbeat she can't ignore, and Tessa's name blooms across the screen, like an accusation that learned to spell. Mara answers without deciding to, and the first thing she hears is ambient breath, the hush before a confession or a lie. Tessa says her name gently, like testing bathwater, then rushes. It wasn't like that. Jonah was lonely. She was drunk. It was a mistake curated by timing and proximity. Mara listens the way paramedics listen, for signs, not stories. She thinks of the offhanded kindnesses that built their friendship. Tessa staying on the line during Mara's first panic attack. Mara editing Tessa's portfolio into a job. The arithmetic feels indecent. When Tessa says, I thought you knew. The sentence is a trapdoor. The floor gives way under a house Mara thought she owned. She swallows, the sound loud in her own ear, and asks one question, careful as a detonator. How many times is a misunderstanding? The silence that follows measures the distance from excuse to truth. Tessa inhales as if she's about to dive. The door opens before she can knock a second time, and Jonah stands with the expression of a man who paused a life mid-frame. He is barefoot, hair damp, a towel draped like a flag of surrender over his shoulder. The room behind him is tidier than usual, which reads as choreography. Mara catalogs the details because details are what remain after certainty leaves. A single wine glass drying on the rack, a cushion indented into a second shape, the faint sweetness of a perfume she doesn't wear. Jonah says her name with soft urgency, a tone that once felt like home, and now sounds like strategy. She holds the phone at her side. Tessa still on the line, breathing the shape of words she can't quite force through. Mara asks Jonah if he wants to explain or confess, and the way his eyes flick toward the living room answers both. He begins with, "It's complicated," and she thinks complication is what cowards call choices they enjoy. The rain slackens outside like weather, stepping back to watch. Inside, 3 people wait for the same sentence to end them. He steps aside and she walks in without brushing his arm, as if contact might smear the evidence she hasn't yet collected. The apartment is aggressively calm. Books stacked by height, a throw blanket folded like a statement, the air perfumed faintly with citrus that doesn't live here. On the counter, the wine glass dries beside a plate that someone wiped too clean, a silence polished into it. Mara holds the phone at her thigh. On speaker, the breath on the line flutters like a trapped moth. "Say it," she tells him, and the syllables land between them with the weight of a chair being pulled out. Jonah looks toward the couch the way guilty men glance at fire alarms, aware of a mechanism that might summon witnesses. He says he was lonely in the gaps, that she worked late, that his worst self had found a door she didn't lock. The words are a staircase she refuses to climb. "How many gaps?" she asks, and the number won't fit through his teeth. The city's generators hiccup. The light dims and swells, exposing him like surf pulling back from a reef, every sharp surface suddenly visible. On the line, Tessa finally says Mara's name with the care of someone carrying glass across a tiled floor. She begins a chronology that sounds like someone else's life. The first misstep, a mercy kiss after bad news. Then, a night keyed open by grief. Then a habit that rebranded itself as fate whenever morning tried to indict them. She says she thought Mara felt a distance, that she mistook the casual bravery of their friendship for permission to be careless with it. The room narrows as the sentences lengthen. Mara imagines each clause printed on a card and pinned to that corkboard at home, a solved crime diagram, pretending it required genius. Jonah tries to interject, and she raises a hand that stops him more effectively than a wall. "You didn't fall into this," she says into the speaker. "You arranged it." Tessa's breath stutters like rain finding new paths down glass. The apology, when it arrives, is bright and fragile and breaks on contact. Mara thinks of rituals, tea, steeping, laundry folding, that once meant safety. Now even nouns feel treacherous. Mara walks to the window and opens it to the wet night, as though the outside could disinfect the air. The city answers with horns, frying oil, a motorbike's brief howl, and the mineral breath of monsoon. She pictures the first time she brought Jonah here, the awkward care with which he touched her books, the way his laugh moved through runes like good weather. "You both knew me," she says, voice steady now, "and you used that map to avoid the mines." Jonah says, "Love makes bad cartographers." She says cowards always blame the compass. On the line, Tessa whispers that she's coming over, as if proximity is a currency that can still purchase mercy. Mara tells her not to, And even to her own ears, the calm sounds unkind. She silences the call and places the phone screen down on the sill, as if covering a mirror during mourning. For a long moment, no one speaks. The quiet makes space for memory to set up its projector, flickering images of ordinary days that now retroactively volunteer clues. A paused text thread, an extra joke, a second glass poured without asking. The first question that matters arrives without ceremony. Were you going to tell me, or were you going to let me drown politely? Jonah doesn't answer quickly enough, and the delay is its own confession. He says he ended it, that endings count for something. She says arithmetic cannot resurrect trust. He steps closer until the faint scent she noticed earlier resolves into a perfume with notes she can name because she once gifted it. Irony packaged in glass. Under the ceiling fan's slow churn, they conduct a forensic audit of evenings and alibis. A launch party that ran late. A deadline that demanded quiet. A weekend retreat that suddenly became team building. Every explanation wears seams she can see now, stitched in a thread of convenience. She asks why Tessa, and his answer is a shrug dressed as philosophy. People reach for the nearest hand when the room goes dark. You turned off the lights, she says, and the truth lands like furniture in an empty apartment, heavy and echoing. Somewhere down the hall, a lift door rattles shut, a metallic period to a sentence she never wrote. Her decision doesn't arrive like thunder. It folds itself into her muscles, a quiet alignment. She tells him she will pack the books she bought, the plants that survived her neglect, the sweater he never returned, because it smelled like a season they no longer own. He asks if they can talk tomorrow, and she realizes that tomorrow is his favorite alibi. She pockets the phone and sends a single text to Tessa. Do not come. Then deletes the thread, a mercy she does not feel. At the door, she pauses. Not for him, but to name the room for herself. Here is the table where ambition ate dinner. Here is the couch where laughter mistook itself for permanence. Here is the window where she first believed that the city could be kind. She doesn't slam the door. The soft click feels more final, as if the apartment itself chose a side. In the corridor, the generator's drone vibrates her ribs. Rain waits patient on the stairwell like a witness with all night to testify. She grips the rail and descends, lighter by a future she refuses to carry. The rain carries her home like a rumor that refuses to stop repeating itself, and by the time Mara reaches her apartment, the hallway smells like wet rope and second chances gone south. Inside, the room she curated out of overtime, pay, and small tendernesses looks staged for a listing. The survival fern leaning toward a reluctant window, the chipped bookshelf shouldering novels that promised better endings. She pulls down a suitcase whose zipper sounds like paper being torn from the past. Packing is a discipline of naming. This mug I earned, this sweater I bought, this photograph I can't unknow. She imagines Tessa's air keys on a dish somewhere, bone-light and treacherous, and she fights the urge to catalog every generosity that became a weapon. A neighbor's radio sighs an old ballad about staying. She closes the window until the lyrics thin to weather. In the bathroom mirror, she meets a version of herself that looks strangely aerodynamic, grief carved into a shape that can move. The phone on the sink sits face down, obedient for once. She breathes until her pulse stops speaking in sirens. By mid-morning, the newsroom hums with the productive cruelty of deadlines. Keyboards chatter like teeth in cold water, and every headline looks suddenly like a dare. Mara walks past the bullpen, where she and Tessa once conspired over leads and coffee that tasted like ambition burned. She feels the gaze of colleagues sharpen and soften, a flock recalculating formation. The editor, Soraya Khan, raises an eyebrow that has edited better writers than their secrets. Her, "You okay?" is both humane and diagnostic. Mara says she will file, because competence is armor, and sits at a desk that remembers 2 laughs. The cursor blinks with the patience of a priest. She begins an essay about misread maps, love as a city navigated by rumor, trust as a streetlight that fails at the wrong corner. She does not name anyone. Truth can be a mirror, angled just so, illuminating without reflecting the beholder's face. In the corner, an empty chair waits like a question mark with legs. Her phone vibrates once and is ignored. She types until the noise of the office becomes a tide she chooses not to fight. At lunch, the city exhales steam and fried spices. Mara sits on a bench outside, umbrella resting like a folded wing, and watches scooters etch impatient calligraphy across puddles. Tessa appears at the edge of the awning, halo of curls dampened into a crown of apology. She doesn't sit immediately, as if the bench might reject her. "I read your draft," Tessa says, "and the trespass lands exactly where it should." She speaks of context, of moments that were accidents until they weren't, of the loneliness that happens even in rooms with laughter. Mara listens without offering shelter. She remembers an afternoon years ago when Tessa bandaged her palm from a kitchen mishap and teased her for being dramatic. How simple trust felt then. How domesticated. Now every word has teeth. "You made me the bystander to my own life," Mara says, and the sentence tastes like iron. Tessa nods, tears gathering in the way storms preface themselves. Inevitable, unhelpful. They agree on nothing except the weather. A drip from the awning taps a rhythm on the bench slat between them. Marking beats a friendship can no longer keep. They walk because sitting makes the air feel domestic, and domesticity is the weapon that wounded them. The promenade is a ribbon of gray between sea and traffic. Gulls practice their V-shaped arguments overhead. Tessa suggests absolution like a subscription. Renewable, automatic. Then catches herself and asks for at least the courtesy of an ending that doesn't humiliate. Mara thinks of the secret economy of friendship, how favors and faith lend against the future, and how defaulting bankrupts a decade. "I won't curate your repentance," Mara says. "That's work." They pass a vendor selling knockoff sunglasses, and the mirrored lenses briefly duplicate them into a quartet of women who still might salvage something. Then a wave collapses against the rocks with theatrical timing, and Tessa laughs once, a tiny betrayal of sorrow, and clamps it down. The sound is a relic from a civilization they lost last night. Mara concedes only this: she will not ruin Tessa at work, and she will not share the messages. Mercy, but to a safe perimeter. Tessa nods like someone spared, which is its own pain. Evening returns with the polite persistence of a bill collector. Back home, Mara lines the suitcase with neat decisions and leaves space for plants. She will ferry last, the fragile citizens of a new republic. She drafts a message to the friends who orbit both her and Tessa, then deletes it. She refuses to audition truth for an audience hungry for plot. Instead, she writes herself a list that isn't punishment. Call the landlord, change the locks, buy better tea. Learn to breathe without apologizing. The list steadies her like good shoes. A final buzz arrives from Jonah. "I'm here if you want to talk." A sentence that misunderstands the difference between availability and care. She blocks him with the same quiet she used to leave his apartment, a seal pressed on a letter that will not be read. Outside, the rain lightens to drizzle, and the city's lights switch on one by one. Constellations deciding to survive the clouds. She sets an alarm, waters the fern, and opens a window just enough to let the air practice being new. The morning opens like a careful hinge, not squeaking, just announcing change. Mara lays newspapers on the floor for the plants, as if they're small travelers awaiting visas, and the suitcase sits zipped like a decision that held. She makes tea, strong enough to quiet the portion of her mind that keeps building alternate timelines out of spare parts. Outside, monsoon has softened into a mist that gives the street a mercy filter. Inside, Her phone wakes to a string of messages from acquaintances suddenly auditioning as historians of last night. She declines their roles with silence. A single practical task steadies her. Call the landlord, arrange the locksmith, schedule a pickup for the old bookshelf that never carried its weight. When the doorbell rings, it's the neighbor from 4B with a roll of bubble wrap and an awkward smile, the uncelebrated kindness of apartment living. She thanks him and thinks how grief doesn't only hollow. Sometimes it tidies. She finds an envelope in the mail slot addressed in Tessa's slanted hand. Key enclosed. Apology implied, explanation withheld. Mara pockets it without reading, because some closures are better as objects than as stories. Back at the newsroom, the hum of purpose feels medicinal. Soraya beckons her into the glass-walled office where privacy is performed but not guaranteed, and slides over a draft assignment. A feature on urban boundaries, how cities draw lines and dare people to cross them. The irony is considerate, almost affectionate. Soraya doesn't pry. She asks for clean prose and a spine. Mara says yes because saying yes to work feels like saying yes to herself. Through the glass she sees Tessa's empty chair, cardigan folded like a sleeping animal, and the sight is both ache and relief. Soraya mentions HR with the efficiency of a weather report and adds that the magazine will respect whatever perimeter Mara names. Ain's the first sentence today that lands without splintering. On her way back to the desk, she passes a whiteboard of headlines and picks up a marker to write a new one in small letters. What we owe the maps we draw. No one comments. The office is fluent in subtext. She sits, opens a blank document, and lets the cursor blink like a tiny metronome for a steadier heart. Lunch break is supposed to be neutral ground, but the cafeteria thrums with microclimates of allegiance. Mara cues for dal and rice, grateful for food that doesn't pretend to be anything else. Two colleagues offer the careful sympathy that keeps to the edges. A third tries humor and retreats when it shatters on the floor between them. At a corner table, she finds a seat far from the rumor mills and opens her notebook, drafting questions about cities and the private fences we carry like invisible luggage. The act of writing is a gate she can still lock. A ping announces a transfer. Jonah has sent money for a utility bill, and the captioned note, for what I used, lands with the odd grace of truth, trying out manners. She forwards it to the landlord without comment. When she looks up, she catches her reflection in the metal napkin dispenser, a woman with storm-sleek hair and eyes that have stopped asking the wrong questions. The cafeteria clatter resolves into a rhythm. Survival makes its own percussion. Evening leans in early, the monsoon dimming the city to a charcoal sketch. Mara takes a rickshaw to Tessa's building, because returning the key by courier feels like outsourcing courage. The lobby smells of mop water and yesterday's jasmine, and the guard's soap opera murmurs rise and fall like waves. On the fourth floor landing, she rehearses a version of farewell that is neither weapon nor balm. Tessa opens at the first knock, face bare of armor, and steps aside without touching. Inside, the apartment is a museum of proximity. 2 coffee cups, a shared blanket, a pair of sneakers lined like punctuation. They speak in low tones about logistics, desk drawer, spare charger, the sweater Mara once loaned and had forgotten. Careful around nouns that could detonate. When Tessa tries to explain love in the grammar of accident, Mara holds up a palm. No tense will fix this sentence. She leaves the key on the table between them like a harmless blade, thanks her for returning hers, and exits with the soft dignity of a door that learned how to close. Night finds her at a prospective sublet in a quieter neighborhood where trees lean over the street like conspirators guarding sleep. The agent is late, which would have irritated the older version of her. Now she delights in the unscheduled silence. She stands at the gate and imagines furniture in negative space, a desk that receives morning, a rug that can forgive spills, a window that doesn't demand explanation. Arif texts to say he can help carry plants. Soraya emails a note about sourcing voices beyond the usual cartographers, The landlord confirms tomorrow's locksmith. The constellation of small reliabilities steadies her more than any vow ever did. When the agent finally arrives, breathless apologies in tow, Mara takes the keys to view alone. The empty rooms echo kindly. She speaks aloud just to try her voice on these walls and hears it return unbroken. In the kitchen, a single bulb glows like a patient idea. She pictures herself cooking for one and not mistaking solitude for lack. She nods to no one and to the future at once. The locksmith's drill makes a sound like a zipper through the day, unseaming one story so another can be worn. Mara stands barefoot in her nearly empty living room, floor echoing with the honest acoustics of rooms that have not learned anyone's habits. Arif arrives with a crate of plants balanced against his ribs, shoulders damp from a rain that can't commit. They talk in the shorthand of neighbors, elevator gossip, the tragedy of shared laundry, and beneath the chatter another current carries gratitude without ceremony. When the last lock clicks, the locksmith demonstrates the new keys with the pride of a man who believes in thresholds. Mara tips him, then labels the keyring. Home, plain as bread. Arif sets the fern by a window that turns the afternoon into a watercolor and asks if she wants tea. She does, and together they wait for the kettle, while the city saws at itself beyond the glass. The steam fogs a small circle on the pane. She draws a line through it and watches it vanish. Some traces, she realizes, deserve the kindness of disappearing. Night unspools without spectacle, which is its own mercy. Mara assembles a desk by feel. Allen key, stubborn dowels, the promise of flat-pack stability, and opens her laptop to a page that remembers the last sentence she trusted herself to write. The feature blooms slowly. A city map drawn from the inside out, children chalking borders around puddles, couples moving couches across apartment lines, municipal lines redrafting themselves like weather. She writes until the muscles in her hand ache and the kettle protests into the quiet. A message from Soraya arrives with surgical timing. Keep the river motif, cut the sermon. It lands like mentorship should. Unsentimental, exact. Outside, tires hiss on wet asphalt. Inside, the lamp crowns the desk with a pool of gold that doesn't reach the corners yet. She resists checking the dead threads of old conversations. Absence should not require monitoring. When she finally leans back, the paragraph holds. Not triumph, just the clean click of a drawer that finally fits. At the newsroom, HR becomes a room with upholstered chairs and sentences that have lacquer. A policy is read. Respectful workplaces, conflict boundaries, confidentiality, and Mara nods through the choreography. Tessa sits opposite, eyes steady in a way that once meant courage. Now it reads as a truce with grief. Soraya hovers in neutral orbit, a lighthouse that promises nothing except the existence of shore. They speak plainly. Workflow separations, editorial chains, no shared assignments for a season. The language is scaffolding. No one pretends it's architecture. When the meeting adjourns, Tessa asks if she can say one thing not for the record. Mara allows a sentence. I will miss knowing your day, Tessa says, voice unadorned. It is a kind weapon, and it lands without wounding because it arrives too late to matter. In the hall, the copy machine hums like a diligent animal. Soraya taps Mara's draft and quotes a line about coastlines that won't hold. Good, she says. Now make it inevitable. A package arrives at the sublet wrapped in brown paper. No return address. Handwriting she can recognize even in a blackout. Inside, a book they once argued about. Poems that mistake tenderness for permission. Its margins caged with Jonah's notes and a letter not yet open. She sits at the small table where dinner will eventually become habit and reads the first line aloud to the quiet. Apology threaded through explanation, the tired braid. He confesses to wanting to be the version of himself she believed in, which is not the same as becoming it. She doesn't finish. The words are a rune she has already evacuated. Instead, she opens the book to a random page and underlines a line that refuses metaphor. She writes her own note on a post-it, returning this future unread, and tucks it inside before sealing the envelope addressed to him. The act is bloodless. She is surprised by the gentleness available after fire. Outside, a stray dog negotiates the trash with patient intelligence. Survival, the city keeps teaching, is a craft. The first dinner in the new place is an omelet that comes apart and tastes perfect anyway. Arif drops by with a spare lamp and the gossip of a building discovering a new resident to be kind to. He stays long enough to fix a squeaky hinge and decline dessert he secretly wanted. When he leaves, the apartment notices it is alone with her and relaxes. Mara eats on the floor because chairs will come later and reads her feature aloud to test the music of it. The paragraphs carry. The cadence doesn't beg. She records a voice memo to herself. Small promises about sleep, running shoes, calling her mother before news finds her without context. She places the plants along the window like small green verbs and opens the latch to let the monsoon breathe through. The city's distant horns thread the air like a chorus rehearsing intervals. She stands very still and offers the room a quiet vow. I will not betray you for a version of love that forgets my name. The vow holds. Outside, the rain approves in a language she finally understands. The city scene where sea meets settlement is a patient argument, and Mara rides there at first light to listen. Survey flags prick the mud like tiny refusals, and a civil engineer named Parveen explains how maps learn to lie when money does the teaching. Mara records her. But what holds her is the boy, chalking a line along the curb, declaring one side home, and the other flood with the solemnity of a judge. She asks him what happens if it rains harder. He shrugs and moves the line. The simplicity rattles her. Borders as verbs, not nouns. She thinks about the text thread that moved the line of her life, and how quickly language flooded all the rooms. As she scribbles, her phone hums with a calendar alert she forgot to kill. Jonah's reminder for a dinner they never took. She deletes it without ceremony and returns to the boy who's already redrawn his perimeter to protect a snail inching across danger. The kindness is unspectacular and complete. Mara writes, what we call resilience is sometimes just a quieter cartography. The tide inhales. The survey flags bow as if conceding the point. By noon, the newsroom sounds like weather again, and rumor tries to enroll her as a protagonist. Someone posts a sanitized thread in the company chat about professional conduct that is obviously about them, and the air dips with a collective flinch. Soraya intercepts with authority that doesn't raise its voice, corralling spectacle back into work. Mara keeps typing, her draft ribboning into a section about soft borders. The ones between colleagues, between apology and absolution. The door glass shivers when Tessa steps in. She doesn't approach, just nods in a manner that admits history without rehearsing it. HR slides Mara a memo reinforcing separations, a scaffold that feels steadier today. The cursor blinks over a sentence that won't lie down. We redraw lines to survive, then pretend they were always there. She wonders if survival can be generous without pretending not to be a choice. The office printer sews pages together. The coffee machine sighs like a realist. She emails Soraya a revised lead that cuts ornament like fat. And for the first time in days, her shoulders forget to guard their corners. The panel is in a community hall whose paint fights humidity and loses annually. Chairs scrape, microphones crackle, and the audience is a thicket of umbrellas drying into the air. The moderator lobs questions about city limits and human ones, and Mara answers with prose tamed to speech, careful to keep the line between the work and the wound. Tessa sits 2 seats away as a fellow guest, offering examples of neighborhoods that reinvented themselves after the sea insisted. Voice steady, data clean. It hurts, and it doesn't, which is a new skill. When someone asks about forgiveness, the room inhales. Mara says borders are not prisons when you hold the key. She's guarding weather inside her house, not bones outside the gate. A murmur moves like wind through reeds, approval or discomfort she can't tell, and she decides not to decode it. Soraya, on the aisle, neither rescues nor retreats. That neutrality is a gift. The moderator smiles like a closing ceremony, and the applause is polite, which is all the mercy she needs tonight. Outside the hall, the rain remembers itself and returns. And Jonah is waiting in that persistent way he mistake for devotion. He looks smaller against the wet, or maybe she's just moved back far enough to see him at true scale. He says he read her latest column, and that he recognized himself in the unflattering geometry. She replies that geometry doesn't flatter. It measures. He tries again with history. The picnic, the winter haircut he pretended not to notice but did, and asks for the kind of conversation that's really a corridor back into her life. Before she can answer, a scooter coughs to a stop. Arif, helmet askew, one hand holding a spare rain poncho like a flag of civility. He asks if she needs a lift home. She says yes, because the answer is yes, full stop. Jonah speaks her name in that old key, and it no longer unlocks anything. She steps into the poncho, thanks him for returning the book, and lets the rain end the scene by turning speech into steam. Night folds her new apartment into a soft box, and the draft is almost a city. Streets where sentences meet and part without collision. She's smoothing a paragraph about river deltas when an email arrives with Tessa's name and a subject line that doesn't dramatize. For the record, the message is brief, unadorned, and final. There was no misunderstanding. She wrote the first message. She sustained it. She is sorry in the obsolete sense of the word. Sorrow, not a plea. Attached is a screenshot of an unsent apology drafted weeks ago and never sent. Cowardice documented. Mara reads it once and recognizes the paradoxical relief of accurate labels. She replies with 2 sentences. Thank you for clarity. I will keep my distance kindly. Then she adds a coda to her piece about how names for weather help you survive it, not summon it. When she hits save, the glass of the window shows her face scrubbed of spectacle and just alive. Outside, the city ticks like a machine older than Betrayal and just as reliable. Inside, she sleeps without rehearsal. Morning prints itself cleanly over the city, and for once the weather keeps its promises. A courier hands Mara the first box of magazines, and the smell of ink lifts like a benediction from paper that hasn't yet learned to curl. She slices the tape with a kitchen knife that used to live beside other people's dinners and stacks her byline into tidy towers, each issue holding the river she mapped and the borders she refused. The essay does not name anyone. It names currents. She reads the opening aloud, about chalk lines and tides. And the room answers with a hush that feels like competence, not loneliness. A message arrives from Soraya. Run page is gorgeous. Hold your ground. Another from Parveen, concise and generous, correcting a figure, and congratulating the spine of the piece. She texts back thanks with the pleasure of speaking to people who know their work and don't ask for blood. Outside, honks braid with kettle steam, a domestic fugue. She slides one copy into a padded mailer addressed to her mother and one into her bag for the seawall, because some victories deserve a view. At lunch, the newsroom tilts towards celebration without spectacle. Someone leaves a pastry box by the coffee machine like a secular offering. Tessa approaches with a measured gait, carrying a copy of the magazine the way one carries a photograph of the past, carefully, without pretending it can be changed. She says the piece is beautiful and cruel in a way that isn't aimed at a person, but at a habit, and that the distinction hurt and helped. Mara thanks her for the email for the record, the phrase now a small bridge that both can cross without touching. They agree on logistics for a shared source next month, a choreography of calendars that feels like surgery done with clean instruments. In the lull, Tessa asks if they will ever be friends again. Mara answers that friendship is a map you don't redraw after a flood. You build stilt houses and wave from them. Tessa nods, eyes steady, and folds the magazine with the care of a truce. The pastry box empties. Deadlines reassert gravity. The conversation ends not with mercy or war, but with work. In the evening, her building's foyer smells of damp rope and citrus cleaner, and a padded envelope waits in the metal maw of the letterboxes. Jonah's handwriting practicing contrition. She takes it upstairs because endings deserve chairs. Inside, a key she'd never noticed he'd kept, a bus ticket from the picnic day, and a letter that mistakes rigor for romance. He says he is finding a therapist and a map back to himself. He hopes the essay will be a landmark rather than a gravestone. She reads to the sentence where he compliments her sentences and stops, because aesthetics cannot commute a sentence. She slides the key into an envelope marked "Wrong Door" and the ticket into the book of poems, not as a relic, but as a warning label. Her reply is 4 words. Economical as a closing argument. Return kept. Boundary kept. The act feels neither vengeful nor soft, just accurate. She seals the return envelope and sets it by the door with tomorrow's trash, where the city's practical machinery will know what to do. She takes the magazine to the seawall at Blue Hour, where cranes turn into origami against the sky, deciding between storm and surrender. Ian is there again, chalking a border that protects nothing practical and everything important. He waves like boys wave at familiar weather. Arif arrives with 2 paper cups of tea and a grin that doesn't audition. He listens while she reads a paragraph about rivers, trained to behave until the city forgets they are alive. Maps need breath, he says, and she laughs because it's true and because it's kind. They talk about hinges that don't squeak and recipes that forgive. Nearby, Parveen walks the line with a clipboard, more windproof than the men who fund her project. She salutes with dry humor, a fellowship of people who prefer nouns to myths. The tide climbs with untheatrical persistence. When the first fat drops land, Arif tilts his umbrella so she inherits the bigger half of shelter. She accepts without rehearsing gratitude. The chalk line blurs and Ayan redraws it, unfussed, a daily liturgy carried out in small hands. Night returns with a gentleness she decides to trust. In the new kitchen, she makes rice slow enough to be a practice and eats at the table, not the floor, because chairs have arrived, and so has the habit of staying. She records a voice memo. This one shorter. Less like triage and more like inventory. Water the plants. Call mother. Replace the hinge. Arif couldn't. Keep the river section. Sleep. The fern approves by leaning fractionally toward a window. The monsoon has finally stopped interrogating. She sends her mother a photo of the magazine against the soft geometry of the room and receives back a blessing disguised as a joke about headlines. Before bed, she stands at the open window and names the city without pleading. A motorbike threading patience, a generator purring like penance, a child laughing, because chalk surrenders but returns. She sets the alarm for a morning that will not have to forgive the night that came before it. The room breathes. The boundary holds. The sky, finally casual, lets a star through.